The criminal cases against former FBI Director James Comey and New York Attorney General Letitia James no longer stand, at least for now. Comey was charged with giving false statements to Congress back in 2020 and obstruction of justice. He pleaded not guilty. James, who has also pleaded not guilty, was charged with bank fraud and making false statements to a financial institution. The cases were being prosecuted by Trump-appointed U.S. Attorney Lindsey Halligan, who has never tried a criminal case. A Virginia federal judge found Halligan was illegally appointed to the role. CBS News Department of Justice reporter Jake Rosen is here with more. Jake, how did the judge reach this decision, and was this any of a surprise?
Well, after Letitia James was indicted, the judge overseeing her case in Norfolk, Virginia, moved to consolidate these cases together. And because this involves the Eastern District of Virginia, a judge from South Carolina was brought into Virginia to oversee this case and these arguments. There were arguments made by both Comey's legal team and Letitia James's case at the same time a couple of weeks ago, where they argued that simply the time had run out for the Trump administration to legally get the person they wanted into this position in the first place. President Trump appointed somebody when he first took over on January 20th to oversee this job. Federal law, this judge says, only allows one appointment for a total of 120 days or potentially 120 days total in these roles before federal courts get to act, and whether they want to keep that person in power or potentially appoint someone else if the Senate can't actually confirm these people. This has happened, Lindsey, in now 4 different jurisdictions around the country. However, in this case, obviously, it's the most specific and consequential of any of them, because Lindsey Halligan herself brought these cases to grand juries in Virginia. She alone signed the indictments, and now, because of that, and her acting completely alone without any career prosecutors involved, these cases have temporarily been dismissed, again, without prejudice, so the Department of Justice can attempt to bring them again, but that will face its own slate of legal challenges.
All right, we'll talk about that in a second with Katrina Kaufman, but do we expect an appeal from the Justice Department?
It's very likely. We have not heard from the Justice Department yet, but in court, the Justice Department did argue that they potentially would have time to bring these cases again under different grounds. But the thing that really makes this kind of up in the air and an airball at the moment is whether the Justice Department would potentially try to do this, and whether whatever career prosecutor or person that these courts in Virginia put into place instead of Halligan overseeing these 2 cases, whether that person would actually sign on and bring these cases. We know in both of these cases they're facing a number of motions to dismiss the indictments under vindictive and selective prosecution. There have been a number of evidence issues really spelled out very well by a judge in the James Comey case that really would cast doubt on whether these cases, if brought again, would potentially face or could get indicted again or would potentially face other obstacles.
Okay, interesting. Jake, thank you. Let's bring in CBS News legal reporter Katrina Kaufman now from Los Angeles to pick up on some of those threads. So, Katrina, we just heard some of what Jake was saying. This is dismissed without prejudice. Can you go into a little bit of what that means and elaborate on what Jake was saying, that particularly when it comes to Comey's indictment, it could be more difficult to bring later down the road?
Absolutely, Lindsey. When a case is dismissed with prejudice, it means you cannot bring those charges again. Here we see the case is dismissed without prejudice. In theory, that means that those charges could be rebrought. So in the case of Letitia James, that is much more possible. When it comes to James Comey, they were running up against the statute of limitations in that case, right up against it when Lindsey Halligan was brought into office and secured that indictment, which has now been invalidated by this judge, Lindsey. There is a footnote in the opinion that's worth noting. And what the judge writes is that usually when an indictment is returned, it tolls the statute of limitation on charges. However, when it's an invalid indictment, that, they wrote, cannot serve to block the door of limitations as it swings close. So the judge appears to be saying that because this was voided as invalid, it doesn't actually pause that period of the statute of limitations, which very likely means that this James Comey case cannot be brought again. I'm sure we will absolutely see the Department of Justice appealing, of course, both Lindsey Halligan's appointment and whether or not they can still try to rebring these charges, Lindsey.
So Lindsey Halligan, a former insurance lawyer, then she joined the White House in his second term. No prosecutorial experience when she was tapped to lead this office. Can you explain the role Attorney General Pam Bondi played in her appointment and what the judge said about that?
Absolutely. So 2 roles. For one, Attorney General Pam Bondi is the one who installed Lindsey Halligan as the interim U.S. attorney. That has been invalidated. As Jake was explaining, what the judge said is after this first 120-day appointment of an interim U.S. attorney, which originally was Eric Siebert, It then goes to the district court to choose whether that person will stay in the position or to appoint someone new until someone is confirmed by the Senate. Now, the other thing that Attorney General Pam Bondi did is, Lindsey, she said that she ratified what Lindsey Halligan did in the grand jury room. There have been a lot of questions about what happened in that grand jury room, whether it was handled properly, the way that a second indictment was secured. It appears that the whole grand jury didn't see that. Attorney General Pam Bondi said that she reviewed those transcripts, Lindsey, and that she ratified whatever happened in that room. She also later on said that Lindsey Halligan was a special attorney, so that even if she was deemed invalid as the U.S. attorney, it would still give her the authority to go into a grand jury and get that indictment. Lindsey, what the judge says in this opinion is that if that's true, if someone could have been now deemed invalidly put in that position and the attorney general could retroactively say, yes, they were in fact a government lawyer, they were able to bring this. She wrote that the implications of a contrary conclusion are extraordinary. It would mean the government could send any private citizen off the street, attorney or not, into the grand jury room to get an indictment as long as the attorney general gave her approval after the fact. Lindsey, the judge writes that that cannot be the law.
Katrina, thank you.
Thank you.